ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਸੀਜੇ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਐਵਰੀ ਥਰਸਡੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਹੋਈਦਾ ਅਤੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਮੋਸਟਲੀ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਸ ਨਾਲ, ਪਰ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਡਿਪੈਂਡ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਆਈਦੇ ਆ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਵਧੀਆ ਸਪੋਕਸ ਪਰਸਨ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਆ। ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਡਾਕਟਰਸ, ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਈ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਫਸਟ ਹੈਂਡ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਦੇ ਐਡੀਟੋਰੀਅਲ 'ਤੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਹੈਪਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਅੱਖਾਂ ਟਰੰਪ 'ਤੇ ਲੱਗੀਆਂ, ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਆਫ USA। ਸੋ ਲੇਟਲੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਵਲਾਦੀਮੀਰ ਪੁਟਿਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ, ਉਹ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਐਂਡ ਹੀ rolled the red carpet for him. He has some kind of issue with him, and so we give them warm welcome. They talk about it, get a good statement. They said the progress is made. Nobody knows what kind of progress they made. And then after a couple of days, Mr. Zelensky, Ukraine's president, came and with all the European leaders, President of France, Prime Minister of England, and another leaders of Europe. That was kind of nice to see that NATO community came together with him, because as you remember, ਪਿਛਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਜ਼ੈਲੈਂਸਕੀ ਆਇਆ ਸੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਲਮੋਸਟ ਬੇਇੱਜ਼ਤੀ ਕਰਤੀ ਸੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ। So this time there was a different environment and Trump got a message that he can't mess around like that with the international leaders. So that conversation was cordial most of the part, but still in the works. So the options they put on the table, Putin and Zelensky should sit together and figure it out. Trump said he want to be there if they want him to, ਪਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਪੁਟਿਨ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹਾਲੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਬਹਿਣਾ। ਸੋ ਇਟ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ ਟੂ ਸੀ ਹਾਊ ਦੈਟ ਵਿਲ ਪੈਨ ਆਊਟ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ। ਬਹੁਤ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਾਨੀ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਦੋਨੇ ਸਾਈਡਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕ ਮਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। Same thing with the Gaza and Israel, that's going on. And Israel, Mr. Netanyahu getting way too aggressive and killing a lot of innocent people. And that's an outcry, and United Nations and a whole world saying that he need to stop that. And well, interesting to see what will happen. And the world dynamics is changing. India's Prime Minister meeting with the China's president and these alliances, a lot of unrest in the world. And locally, in British Columbia, there is a lot of things are going on, but there is nothing, it seems like, productive happening. Infrastructure, all the big projects are, you keep on announcing, but thankfully the SkyTrain is in the building stage. And so it will be interesting to see, and all the issues around British Columbia, lower mainland, about healthcare, about crime. I discuss currently, I couldn't find a better person to discuss all that. And with me today is Surrey White Rocks member of Legislative Assembly, MLA, Mr. Trevor Halford is with me. Trevor is a second term as a MLA from this riding. He grew up in that community, raised his family in that community, very, very much connected with the community, and we will discuss a lot of issues with him. And unfortunately we can't take a calls today, but next time maybe we will be able to. So welcome to CJ Sidhu Show.
CJ, awesome to be back. Thanks for having me again, man.
Yeah, beautiful sunny day today. And
it's always beautiful in Surrey and White Rock, so yeah, we're pretty lucky. But today's exceptional.
Nice breeze at the beach,
what, you and I have run into each other walking along the White Rock Promenade, and we are so lucky to live where we do. But especially right now, in the summer, and we have so many visitors out, and it's just a great place to call home. So very fortunate.
So let's start with what's happening in British Columbia on a legislature, part, and tell us what's going on.
Well, unfortunately, for us as the Conservative Party of BC, we sit in opposition, and the NDP hold a very, very slim majority, but there is no shortages of problems and crises that are going on in our province right now. And people are struggling, and not just in White Rock and Surrey, but it's Prince George, it's Fort St. John, it's across this province. And there's some significant challenges that are going on, obviously with the economy. We can talk about that. You alluded to the healthcare challenges, the infrastructure challenges that we're having right now. So it seems that every part of our province, everything that this provincial government is responsible for, there has been a crisis in every area. And for us, is that, we're trying to bring forward solutions to address those. But right now, unfortunately, things seem to be getting worse before they get better.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹ ਦੱਸੋ ਵੀ ਕੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਵਾਲੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਇੱਥੇ ਬਣੀ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਨਥਿੰਗ ਇਜ਼ ਗੈਟ ਡਨ, ਮਤਲਬ ਕੋਈ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੋ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੋਈ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਇਕੋਨਮੀ, ਪੀਪਲ ਆਰ ਸਟਰਗਲਿੰਗ, ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਦੈਟਸ ਅ ਬਿਗ ਵਨ। ਸੋ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਲੱਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹੀ, ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਇਹਨੇ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਮਤਲਬ NDP ਦੀ ਈਵਨ ਸਲਿਮ ਮੈਜੋਰਟੀ, ਪਰ ਡਿਸੀਜ਼ਨ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੱਥ 'ਚ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ MLA ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਦੇ ਫੇਵਰ 'ਚ ਕਰ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਆ। ਵਾਈ ਇਟ ਹੈਪਨਸ ਦੈਟ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ended up supporting them? Because if they could have done that with the Conservatives, you could have formed the government too.
Yeah, I think we were trying to figure out how that seat count landed. Obviously, Guildford changed and the numbers changed. But for us is that, we ran on a set of principles, very proud of those principles that we ran on. And, I think the Green Party did what they were going to do. I think they probably at this point have some buyer's remorse, given that they strongly opposed Bill 14 and Bill 15, and those were the infrastructure bills that the government rammed through in closure, might I add. So I think they're seeing the challenges of having that agreement, and we'll see. They're in the middle of a leadership race right now. I think that ends sometime in September. So we'll see if they're still supportive of propping up this NDP government at that time.
Yeah, so that will be very interesting. That's my next question. ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਸਿਰੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੜ ਰਿਹਾ ਰਾਈਟ ਨਾਓ, ਐਂਡ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਸਟਰਗਲਿੰਗ, ਐਂਡ B14 B15 ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿੱਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਟਰੈਕ ਡਾਊਨ, ਫਾਸਟ ਟਰੈਕ ਡਾਊਨ ਐਂਡ ਹੈਵਿੰਗ ਦੋਜ਼ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਗੋਇੰਗ, ਉਹਦੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਐਂਡ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵਾਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੱਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ, ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਇਸ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ ਵਨ, ਐਂਡ ਯੂ ਬੀਇੰਗ critic for environment and parks, that you should be talking to those guys, because it happened when Christie lost the election by like one seat. So yeah, well, you know what, I always come from the view of, we always do what's best for the province, and there's things that we work on with cross party lines, and that can include the Green Party, and continue to do that and have those conversations. But for us, there's some core principles of what's going on right now fundamentally we don't support, and whether it's healthcare, whether it's the lack of infrastructure that is going on, or the support for the resource sector, there are things that we fundamentally disagree on. I fully believe that we should be supportive of the LNG sector, right? The Green Party doesn't, and I think probably the majority of the NDP caucus doesn't either, but they're not going to say that, but they've said that in the past. They're not going to say it now because LNG Canada just wrapped up their project, and that was the biggest private sector investment we've ever had in the history of this country. They opposed that. Yeah,
they opposed it.
I remember Christy Clark and you guys, your party spearheaded that under a different name, but so ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ 2 MLA ਆ, ਉਹ ਡਿਸਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਨੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੈਗਾ, ਮੇਕ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਦੈਟ ਵਾਟ ਇਜ਼ ਬੈਸਟ ਫॉर ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਕੰਮ ਠੀਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ। ਬਾਕੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਫੰਡਾਮੈਂਟਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਆ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਨਵਾਇਰਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ। Even Trevor is a critic for environment and parks, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਜਿਵੇਂ LNG ਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਆ and we know we need that infrastructure and we need these big projects considering what Trump is with the tariffs and stuff. We need to find other world partners to do trade with them.
CJ, that's a great point, because you know it's not, it would almost be funny if it wasn't tragic, is that when you look at it, and the NDP have been in power for over 8 years now, right? And when you look at what's wrapping up, you talked about it in your intro, is the TMX pipeline. That's almost complete. LNG Canada, that's almost complete. Site C, that's almost complete. That represents in the multiple of billions and billions and billions of dollars, and the jobs, the tens of thousands of jobs that come with that, and the energy stability that we get with that as well. All three of those projects that I just mentioned were all opposed by the NDP. They were actually all opposed by Adrian Dix, who is now the Minister of Energy. He's the guy responsible for energy in this province. He opposed Site C, he opposed TMX. He actually pretty much lost the 2013 election because of that decision. And he opposed LNG. And now this is the leadership that is responsible for our energy futures and securities. And I think British Columbians have a lot of questions about that. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's great that they've somehow found a little bit of religion on the resource sector, but you know, you talk about the tariffs and the struggle that we're in economically right now. My point is we didn't need to be there, because if this government actually invested in those jobs in the resource sector over the last 8 years, we would be in a much, much stronger position than we are today.
Totally. So ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੇਜਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਲਵੇਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ NDP ਨੇ, ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਏਡਰੀਅਨ ਡਿਕਸ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਰੈਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਲਈ, ਸੋ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ LNG ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਈਟ C ਡੈਮ ਹੈ, TMX ਹੈ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਨਾ ਹੋਣ, ਬਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਆਫ ਡਾਲਰਸ, ਲੋਟ ਆਫ ਇੰਪਲੋਇਮੈਂਟ, ਇਹ ਨਾ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਜੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੋਣ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਸਟਰੋਂਗਰ ਬਣ ਸਕਦਾ ਆ। And going with that, Trevor, you know, when they talk about infrastructure, like look at the Patalo Bridge, you know, changing 4 lanes with a 4 lane. And then same thing, you know, the tunnel. Yeah, that could have been, you know, 8-lane highway. It will be up and running by now.
3 years ago.
3 years.
Should have been running 3 years ago.
And they still changing the tunnel with tunnel. Why don't, I ask all the politicians, all stripes, including NDP, why they do window dressing and why don't they look at 20 years down the road?
I think the fundamental difference between, and this is why there's been struggles within the NDP, is because I fundamentally believe that they don't believe in infrastructure or in getting things done. Now, they can do announcements, they can do all that. How many announcements have we had on the Massey replacement? Lots.
Hospital, second hospital.
Talk about that. But in terms of the Massey, that bridge should have been open 3 years ago. And people would be driving over that right now. But tonight, people are going to be stuck in traffic. If there's an accident, they're going to be delayed 2 hours getting home.
Yeah.
We see that every single day over there. And when we look at some of the other things that they're doing, like look at the commitments that they've made to Surrey in terms of medically. So they're saying, okay, well, we're building a new hospital in Surrey in Cloverdale. Great. The problem with that is that when you look at that hospital, there's no intensive care unit going to go in there. There's no maternity unit that's going to go in there. It's not really a hospital, is it? So the fact is that if somebody has a very serious situation, if they have a heart attack a block away from that hospital, they're not going to that hospital. Worse than that, if they have a heart attack, they're likely not even going to go to Surrey Memorial because we don't have the cardiac care at Surrey Memorial to treat that person. So we're going to go over the bridge and we're going to have to go to Royal Columbian. So you're going to bypass 2 hospitals. That's not the way to do healthcare in BC. And, you know, we are seeing it's not a problem right now. It's a full-fledged crisis.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟ੍ਰਕਚਰ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਪਟਾਲੋ ਬ੍ਰਿਜ ਹੋਵੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਨਵਾਂ ਹੀ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਆ, ਐਟ ਲੀਸਟ 8 ਲੇਨਸ ਤਾਂ ਹੋਣ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ। ਸੇਮ ਥਿੰਗ ਵਿਦ ਦ ਮੈਸੀ ਟਨਲ, ਉਵੇਂ ਹੀ ਆ, ਉਹਦੀ ਅਨਾਊਂਸਮੈਂਟ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਉਹ 8 ਲੇਨ ਹਾਈਵੇ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ, ਇੰਨੇ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਬੈਕਲੌਗ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਨਾਊਂਸ ਕਰ ਹਟੇ, ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਣਾ ਵੀ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵੀ ਇੰਟੈਂਸਿਵ ਕੇਅਰ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਮੈਟਰਨਿਟੀ ਵਾਰਡ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ। ਸੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਈਵਨ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਰਟ ਅਟੈਕ ਹੋ ਜਾਏ ਤਾਂ ਸਰੀ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਕੈਨ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਦੈਟ। ਉਹ ਨਿਊ ਵੈਸਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਰਾਮਾ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ। And talking about the healthcare and this kind of scenario, that these small town hospital emergency rooms, how many weekends one after another get closed for the weekend? If that happens there to someone,
They die.
They die.
So the fact is, and CJ, that's a really good point, and it's a tragic one that you bring up, is that we have never had more closures of our ERs, emergency rooms, than we are experiencing over the last couple of years. And what that means, so it's hard enough. Over the last few weeks, we've seen Delta Hospital emergency room close 3 times.
In Delta, yeah.
In Delta. So the stress that puts on Surrey Memorial, that puts on Peace Arch, that puts on Langley, that cannot happen. But think about it this way. Think about what happens when Quinnell closes, okay? Or the hospital up in Kitimat, or the other areas that we've seen, and their emergency rooms shut down, which is happening more often than not. So can you imagine having a sick child, a sick parent, and then going to that ER and then realizing that it's closed and you have to drive, in some cases, 5, 7, 10 hours?
Oh, yeah.
Like, that is not healthcare. And we should never, ever be in this position. And yet, because of this government and the choices they've made, we continually suffer in our healthcare system because this government cannot find adequate solutions to address the problems that we face.
Yeah, so ਸਾਡੀ healthcare ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਸੀ। ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਹੈ, ਨਾਟ ਓਨਲੀ ਸਮਾਲ ਟਾਊਨ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਹੈ, ਉੱਥੇ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਡਿਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ 'ਤੇ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ, ਸ਼ੋਰਟੇਜ ਆਫ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਔਰ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਵਰਕਰਸ। ਡੈਲਟਾ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਲੋਅਰ ਮੇਨਲੈਂਡ 'ਚ, ਉਹਦਾ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੂਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ 'ਤੇ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਲੋਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਚਲੋ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ 1-ਅੱਧੇ ਘੰਟੇ 'ਚ ਬੰਦਾ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਸਕਦਾ ਸਰੀ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਜਾਂ ਨਿਊ ਵੈਸਟਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਮਾਲ ਟਾਊਨ ਆ 5-6 ਘੰਟੇ ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਰਟ ਅਟੈਕ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚਣਾ। ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਰੀਲੀ a serious problem. So what is the solution, Trevor? It's nice to talk with the problems and stuff, but what are the solutions that your opposition, as a opposition, you suggest them?
Well, there's a few things. And one is you actually have to admit and identify that there's a problem. And this government will blame everybody else except for themselves. So the first thing is we need more doctors and we need more nurses. I think everybody will agree on that. How do we get that? Well, one is we actually have to open up and make it an easier accreditation process for people outside of British Columbia to come here. If you look at Alberta, they actually camp outside of the medical schools in Ireland, in London, in India, and they actually have, in some cases, they have offices there, and they do a recruitment drive to sell Alberta to those doctors that are graduating. Like, talk about where we live, it's pretty beautiful. Obviously, we have some affordability issues, but we need to get doctors and nurses coming into Canada, right?
Even the credentials, that's the easy part.
Yeah. But we've been talking about this for 8 years.
And
it's not
I
getting
tell you
better.
another thing, Trevor, that the foreign trained Canadian doctors, they went there to schools, they're waiting forever. I bump into another one another day, and no residency spaces. Like, that's the least expensive option.
So if one of the NDP ministers was sitting here and doing this show today, they'd say, well, oh, wait, we've got a medical school opening up in SFU. Great. That has been delayed at least 3 times, right? And I support having additional medical schools. I think that we need to be doing that. But the fact is that we should be having people that have been graduating today from that school, not 3, 4, 5 years from now.
And it's not a bad news, it's opening. But by the time it opens, and the first batch, it will take 4 or 5 years they become out of that college as a doctors.
And here's the other problem too, is that we want to make sure that they're staying, we want to make sure they're getting trained in BC, but we want to make sure they stay in BC. And part of the challenge is that when they go and they look at the chaos that we're seeing in our emergency rooms right now,
No way.
right? That's not the best way to recruit. So, we need to make sure that we are absolutely doing everything we possibly can to invest in our doctors and nurses, not the bureaucrats, right? We don't need more comms officers working for Fraser Health. We don't need elaborate severance packages. The government just fired the CEO of Fraser Health. She got over $600,000 in severance.
Oh, yeah.
So think about the doctors, the nurses that we could be hiring instead of fixing the mistakes that this government continues to make.
ਸੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਵੇਟ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਈਵਨ ਸਰੀ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਾਕਟਰਸ ਅਤੇ ਨਰਸਿਸ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸ਼ੋਰਟੇਜ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦਾ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਦੇ ਵੈਂਟ ਟੂ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਐਂਡ ਵਾਈ ਦੇ ਵੰਸ ਦੇ ਬਿਕਮ ਅ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਦੇ ਕਮ ਟੂ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਵਾਈ ਕੈਨ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਕੈਨ ਡੂ ਦੈਟ ਫਿਰ ਇਹ ਕਾਲਜ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕਾਲਜ ਐਸ ਐਵ ਹਿਊਜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਵਾਂ ਖੁੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਗੁੱਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਬਟ ਉੱਥੇ ਹਾਲੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੋਸਟਪੋਨ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਕਾਲਜ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਛਾ ਫਿਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ 4-5 ਸਾਲ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਣੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਬਣਨ 'ਤੇ ਪਰ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਇਜ਼ ਰਾਈਟ ਨਾਓ so it's a problem need to be addressed now Trevor rather than
the problem too is that it seems to me and others that this government is just trying to survive the day and survive each crisis that it finds itself in. So when you're doing that, you're actually not working forward on the solutions that we need to actually fix the crisis. They're just trying to survive it. So they'll go and they'll do like they did just before the election. Adrian Dix at the time was Minister of Health. He'll go and meet with the doctors at Surrey Memorial, say, okay, just, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to do that. None of that stuff has happened. There's no work on a second tower. There's nothing that we're seeing at Surrey Memorial. We're not seeing the cardiac care that was promised. We're not seeing the contracts with the doctors that were promised. So it's just, they wake up with the mentality of how do we survive the mess that we found ourselves in? We, our party, I wake up with the mentality is how do we fix the mess that we're in to make life better for every British Columbian that's living here today?
That's very true. So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ NDP ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਹ ਮੈਸ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਜਾਂ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਵਿੰਡੋ ਡਰੈਸਿੰਗ you fix the problem so it's more reactive than proactive to get
100%
things done
100%
and ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਸੋਲਵ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ and I always have an issue with the ruling parties and I will not say politicians because you are a politician too that why they just look for their term why they don't look at 10-20 years down the road the next generation your children my children worrying about them rather than just to stay in a power one way or the other.
I think actually successful governments have done that. And if you look at the fact is that, even with LNG Canada and even with Site C, it wasn't, the premiers at the time that were doing the ribbon cutting for those. There are different premiers, there are different governments. And so they're forward thinking. You think about the legacy of the Canada Line and every mayor said, don't do the Canada Line. Canada Line is one of the most successful transportation projects that have ever been done in the history of this province. We support SkyTrain. What I don't support, when we're talking about infrastructure, is this government has a term that's called community benefit agreements.
Yes.
So, with that sounds nice. Okay, the word community benefit agreements, that sounds great, but what that actually means is that the NDP government is going to pick and choose who is going to work on these big infrastructure projects. Doesn't matter if they're going to come in over budget. Doesn't matter if they're going to be delayed years and years. So when you look at the SkyTrain, that's been delayed 4 times now. It is over 50% over budget. And at the end of the day, who's paying for that? Those are tax dollars that could have gone into healthcare. Those are tax dollars that could have gone into education. But at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that are having to burden the cost of the NDP saying, we are going to pick who is going to be successful on these projects based on their union affiliations. I don't agree with that. I do not think that that's a way to operate the province.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੈ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਡਿਲੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਕਾਈ ਟ੍ਰੇਨ ਦਾ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ 50% ਓਵਰ ਬਜਟ ਹੈ ਹੁਣ ਜਦੋਂ ਓਵਰ ਬਜਟ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਟੈਕਸ ਪੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਤੇ ਹੀ ਬਰਡਨ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਟੈਕਸ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਯੂ ਐਂਡ ਮੀ ਪੇ ਫॉर दैट ਐਂਡ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੈਗੇ, ਮੈਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਆਪਦੀ ਟਰਮ ਦਾ ਹੀ ਸੋਚਦੇ, ਲੰਮਾ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ। ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਪ੍ਰੀਵੀਅਸ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਸੀਗੀ, ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਅਗਰੀ ਵਿਦ ਦੈਟ, ਦੇ ਗੈਟ ਇਟ ਲੋਟ ਡਨ, ਲਾਈਕ LNG ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਸੀ, ਸਾਈਡ C ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਸੀਗਾ, ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਲਾਈਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੈਰੀ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਐਂਡ ਦ ਬਿਗੈਸਟ ਵਨ, ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਮੇਅਰਸ ਉਹਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਸੀਗੇ। ਸੋ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜੇ if you have a will to do something and too long term, sometimes you have to live with the criticism, but once it's done, like you mentioned Canada Line or LNG and these kind of project, you can balance environment with all these issues because you're an environment critic, but we can't put the projects on hold like that.
Yeah, and think about how much opposition there was to the Sea to Sky Highway, right?
Yeah,
One of the dangerous highways in Canada. That got done, right? Think about the opposition. We had a premier that fought us tooth and nail on hosting the Olympics. He actually followed around the protesters, offering legal advice when they were interacting with police. They protested the Olympics. Think about all the big things that we have done, and it takes political will, it takes guts. And, unfortunately, this is a government that kind of looks at, the day and how the winds are blowing, and they may support a project one day, they may support something the next day. And that's not a way to govern, right? And now we're seeing that we're paying the price for those decisions or lack of decisions in some cases.
ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਵੱਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਆ, ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ NDP ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਆ ਉਹ ਦੇਖਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਕੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਐਂਡ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਲੌਂਗ ਟਰਮ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, ਐਂਡ that create a lot of issues, get the project done on time and on budget. When the cost overruns, then taxpayer foot the bill.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we want to make sure that people are seeing British Columbia as a safe place to invest, right? We want that, and I think part of the challenge is that the goalposts keep moving. It depends on what the projects are. So now some projects will go through an environmental assessment, some projects won't. And I think people that are coming in here and they're looking at whether or not we should invest not millions of dollars, but in some cases multiple billions of dollars into our province at a time we desperately need it. They're saying, well, I don't know. Am I a winner or am I a loser? Because it's now up to Cabinet to determine who is going to be successful in terms of doing business in British Columbia and who is not. And I fundamentally think that is not the way to go. And I think the majority of British Columbians would support that.
ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਫੇਵਰਿਜ਼ਮ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ, ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਸ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ। ਟਰੈਵਰ ਨੇ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟ ਐਗਰੀਮੈਂਟਸ, ਅਤੇ ਜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਿਸਨਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਈ ਬਰੌਟ ਦੈਟ ਇਸ਼ੂ, ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟ ਐਗਰੀਮੈਂਟਸ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਯੂਨੀਅਨਾਈਜ਼ ਪੀਪਲ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹੀ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਬਿਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਐਂਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਟ ਕਾਂਟਰੈਕਟਰਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਡਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, what happens is then the cost of those projects like skyrocketed.
Do you know?
I talked to Chris Gardner,
Yeah.
independent contractors president for that association, and he told me very clearly how they're affecting these projects.
Yeah, it's enormous. And you know what? At the end of the day, the people that suffer are the workers in British Columbia and the taxpayers that are having to pay for the added expense of doing a community benefit agreement. It is wrong and it needs to be stopped.
And just moving a little bit, switch of the gear here, crime is so bad in British Columbia and Lower Mainland. From petty crime to serious crimes to guns and gangs, and it's just going crazy.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is that we have a number of criminals that are responsible over and over again for the same crimes, but instead of staying in jail, they're back out on the street within hours. And
catch and release.
It's catch and release. It's like a revolving door, and I can't imagine how frustrating this would be for law enforcement. I can't imagine how frustrating this would be for the local convenience store owner or the people working at the grocery stores that are watching people walk out with hundreds of dollars of their products every single day, and it's usually the same person.
And what they get slap on the wrist and they're back on the road.
So why would they stop? Why would they stop? Because we have a system, we have a justice system supported by a premier that thinks it's okay for repeat offenders to be out in the streets immediately after they offend. And not just in cases of petty crimes or whether it be shoplifting or other theft. We're talking about serious assaults.
Seriously, yeah.
Where we've seen people released after vicious assaults, and then what do they go out and they do it again? And in some cases, we've seen loss of life of innocent people. And it's beyond tragic, but it's again, it comes down to political will, and it comes down to tough decisions. I don't think this is a tough decision. I think people should have consequences for what they do. And until they are ready to be released back into society, they should be behind bars.
Yeah. ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਸੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਛੋਟੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟੋਰ ਹੈ ਕਨਵੀਨੀਅੰਸ ਸਟੋਰ ਜਾਂ ਛੋਟੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਰਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਲੋਅਰ ਮੇਨਲੈਂਡ 'ਚੋਂ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕੈਚ ਐਂਡ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਹੈ ਛੋਟੇ ਮੋਟੇ ਦਰ ਅਗੇਨ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ and I talk to people, there is a big concern, Trevor, about that. You know, the laws are so relaxed and easy that, and you're 100% right about law enforcement agencies. I talk to the cops, and all the agencies, and they said, that's fine, CJ. You know, we prepare a very good file to convict them, and then thrown out.
They're out.
And even a public prosecutors are pretty upset about that too, because, you know, if case is weak, first of all, they will not put through it. And if they do it, then it's very embarrassing because it's thrown out.
We are talking about individuals that in some cases have brought in 100, 200, 300 times.
Yeah.
Okay. When does it stop? So when does it stop for the shop owner that is watching hundreds of dollars of their products? When does it stop for the innocent person that's walking down the street, gets punched in the head? When does it stop for the young mom that gets stabbed to death by a repeat offender? When does it stop? And it stops when this government gets the political courage or the moral courage to say enough is enough, and we are going to make sure that repeat offenders stay where they are, stay where they need to be, and that is behind bars, and making sure, and we have to give resources to make sure that people are getting support and rehabilitation in some cases. But at the end of the day, who are we protecting? Are we protecting the criminals, or are we protecting the public? And I think the majority of people, if not everyone, wants to make sure that we have safe streets.
So he crime ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਰਿਲੈਕਸਡ ਲਾਜ਼ ਆ ਉਸ ਲਾਅ ਇਨਫੋਰਸਮੈਂਟ ਏਜੰਸੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੱਥ ਟਾਈਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਕੇਸ ਪ੍ਰਿਪੇਅਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਉਹ ਕੇਸ ਥਰੋਨ ਅਵੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਸਲੈਪ ਔਨ ਦਾ ਰੈਸਟ ਮਾੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਉਹ ਫੇਰ ਆ ਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਐਂਡ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਰੀਸੈਂਟਲੀ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਸਮ ਬਰਗਲਰ ਇਨ Ontario and the house owner that beat the hell out of him, and then they not only charge the criminal but also charge the house owner because he have to protect himself. And Doug Ford stood up and he told that, you know, there is no way if somebody walk in my home, I will protect my home whatever it takes. And he said it's ridiculous that the homeowner was charged.
Yeah, you know, CJ, my son takes the bus into Vancouver every day through the summer, and he does work in downtown. He does landscaping. And it's a fear that I have. And I never thought I'd have fear of my son going to my own city in Vancouver and working during the day and what might happen to him. And, you know, and people have to be able to, if the government is not protecting us, people are thinking, okay, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my family? Right? And it should never come to that. But, you know, unfortunately, the streets right now, and people are feeling unsafe, whether it's Surrey or Vancouver or Prince George, it doesn't matter, Victoria.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we're all facing this in the
province. Small or big city,
and
it doesn't matter.
And again, it's a lack of conviction by this government. Literally, no pun intended, it's a lack of conviction.
Yeah. So crime ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬੇਟਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਬੱਸ ਤੇ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਲੈਂਡਸਕੇਪਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਸਮਰ ਜੌਬ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ ਸੋ everybody as a parent you worried if something happens ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਕੰਸਰਨਡ ਹੈਗੇ ਡਗ ਫੋਰਡ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਬੜੇ ਸਟਰੋਂਗਲੀ ਵੈਲ ਸਪੋਕਨ ਗਾਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਹੀ ਲੇਟਲੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਿਤੇ ਘਰੇ ਵੜ ਗਿਆ ਕੋਈ ਚੋਰ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਚੰਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਠੋਕਿਆ ਤੇ ਹੀ ਐਂਡਡ ਅਪ ਇਨ ਦਾ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਬੜੀ ਮੱਚ ਐਂਡ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚਾਰਜ ਕਰਤਾ ਹੋਮ ਓਨਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਡਗ ਫੋਰਡ ਸੈਡ why you charge him we have to protect ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਘਰੇ ਵੜ ਕੇ ਦੇਖੇ ਮੈਂ I will do the same thing so it's a very fine area that on a legal jargon and all that but where is the average people's rights.
Exactly. And you think of yourself and the family and, to protect. And I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I'm pretty confident I'd defend my family. And I think the majority of people, but we don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be in a position of, I've had a senior bloodied almost to death at a home invasion at 1 a.m. They woken up out of bed, answered the door, and they were beaten half to death in White Rock. And that is not the community that I grew up in, but we are facing those challenges way more than we ever have. And it's, again, it needs to be stopped.
So Trevor ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਰੁਕਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ ਬੜੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਗਲਤ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਦਾ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ਾ 1 ਵਜੇ ਰਾਤ ਦੇ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਿਆ ਤੇ ਬੀਟਨ ਅਪ ਇਨ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਸੋ ਉਹ ਸਿਟੀ ਬੜੀ ਸੇਫ ਸਮਝੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਹੈ ਇਟਸ ਹੈਪਨਿੰਗ ਐਵਰੀਵੇਅਰ ਸਮਾਲ ਔਰ ਬਿਗ ਟਾਊਨ ਐਵਰੀਵੇਅਰ So Trevor, we have about 5 minutes left. Sure. We get back on the politics side of it a bit. So the John Rustad's leadership review, I think, is kind of mandatory in the bylaws or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not that somebody challenged his leadership, but what do you think? Will he survive, or how your caucus is working together?
Listen, I've known John for a long time. Actually, I've known John for over 20 years, and I can tell, if you look at what John's done over the last couple of years, I think it's significant, if not historic. I think this province, I think the party owes a lot to John. Yeah, he's in the middle of a leadership review, and we'll see what those numbers are. But I think that John's got support. I really do. And for us, I think when people are talking about leadership, they're talking about the lack of leadership that they're seeing out of the Premier's office right now. That's what I'm hearing. That people are saying, where is the Premier? Where is the Premier on healthcare? Where is the Premier on safety? Where is the Premier on the economy? And he'll pop up and he'll make an announcement here or there. But when it comes to the fact that this Premier can't step up and fight for the funding of a young terminally ill girl, and they say no to her funding, and they're giving $600,000 of severance to a CEO of Fraser Health, that's not leadership, right? And I think the public is focused on the lack of leadership they're seeing from this Premier right now, and I think John he's out there meeting everyday British Columbians. I don't think he's taken many days off. Proud to support John and proud to support the work that our caucus is doing.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟਡ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਉਹਦਾ ਰਿਵਿਊ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੈਪਟੈਂਬਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੇ ਖਤਰਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਰਿਵਿਊ ਦਾ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵੀ ਆਈ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਹਿਮ ਅਤੇ ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਡੂਇੰਗ ਅ ਗੁੱਡ ਜੌਬ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਗੁੱਡ ਲੀਡਰ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੋਕਸ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਗਰਲ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟਰਮੀਨਲ ਇਲ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਡੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੱਟ ਕਰਤੀ ਸੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਕੱਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਕ CEO ਫਰੇਜ਼ਰ ਹੈਲਥ ਦੀ CEO ਹੈ ਉਹਦਾ ਸੈਵਰੈਂਸ ਪੈਕੇਜ 6 ਲੱਖ ਦੇ ਕਰੀਬ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਖਰਾਬ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਲੱਗਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੈਸਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੋ ਕਮਿੰਗ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ the politics part. Yeah. So now we have another third party showed up, one BC. And then, BC United, obviously former BC Liberal. Yep. You were one of the MLAs under Falcon. And, what is a landscape? Because, What I'm thinking is, the right vote, center to right vote is splitting, and NDP is laughing, and they even doing a bad job, but they're still able to form the government.
Yeah, I can see the concern with that, but I've always said, and what's worked is, I talk about and I focus on the issues that people are expecting me to focus on. That's healthcare, that's the economy, that's crime, what we've talked about, that's the infrastructure. And those are the core issues right now that are going on. And there's some other issues in terms of, land title and education that are very important, and those need to be worked through and addressed. And I think, at the end of the day, British Columbians want a government that they can rely on, that is going to go out there and do the things that they say they're going to do and focus on the things that we need to be focused on. And I think that's exactly where our party's going, and I think the voters are going to support that.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਕਿ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਉਹ BC ਹੈ, ਉਧਰੋਂ BC ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਫੋਲਡ ਕਰਤੀ, ਫਾਰਮਰ BC ਲਿਬਰਲਸ। ਹੁਣ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਲਾਂਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ 1BC, I think that 1BC is former liberals, I think, provincial liberals, I don't know how many of them. So ਇਹਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਟੂ ਰਾਈਟ ਪ੍ਰੋ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਫ੍ਰੀ ਐਂਟਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਵੋਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ, it gets split, and then NDP is laughing and they form the government.
Yeah, but CJ, you're right. And I think that, what we look at right now is British Columbians are going to say, what in this province has gotten better over the last 8 years? Has healthcare gotten better? No. Has education gotten better? No. Has transportation gotten better? No. Has the economy gotten better? Definitely no. And in fact, they're failing grades on everything. And so I think for us and for me, I think if we put forward a concrete plan that addresses those issues, which I know we will do, I think the voters are going to see that, because I think I see it every day, the frustration that is mounting with this government, their lack of inaction in terms of getting things done. Like I said, they can't even make a decision whether or not they're going to fund medication for a 9-year-old who's terminally ill. They can't even make a decision on whether or not they are going to build the Massey Crossing. So we are seeing this time, and who's suffering? Everyday British Columbians. So again, I think the choice is going to be very clear for voters. I don't get too fixated on a vote split. I think that if we do the things and we talk about the things that are important to British Columbians, I think the rest will take care of itself.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੁਣ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਆ, ਜਿਸ 'ਚ 1BC ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਫਾਰਮਰ ਲਿਬਰਲਸ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਫਿਰ BC ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਚਲੋ ਫੋਲਡ ਅਪ ਕਰਤੀ ਸੀਗੇ ਕੈਵਨ ਫਾਲਕਨ ਨੇ, ਐਂਡ ਸੋ ਨਾਓ ਦਾ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵਸ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫੋਕਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਪੀਪਲ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਪਿਛਲੇ 8 ਸਾਲਾਂ 'ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ NDP ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਨਾ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ 'ਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, ਨਾ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ, ਨਾ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ 'ਚ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬੱਚੀ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦਵਾਈ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਬੈਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟਰਮੀਨਲੀ ਇਲ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ CEO ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪੈਕੇਜਸ ਦੇਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਗੁੱਡ ਪਲੈਟਫਾਰਮ, ਗੁੱਡ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜੇ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਐਂਡ ਪੀਪਲ ਵਿਲ ਸੀ ਦੈਟ। So if you come up with you don't need to wait when the election will come, but your platform have to come with a concrete plan that how you're going to address all these issues we are talking about. Like, it's nice to criticize, obviously critical role in a opposition for sure,
different title,
but how to we have to come up with the solutions and how to fix the problem. And that's you go to the people and make NDP accountable what they are not doing. That should be the goal.
100% agree with you on that. And I think at the end of the day, we have some amazing people that call this province home. And I think a lot of those people are being underutilized. And I think that if we go in there, whether it's the healthcare sector, whether it's the construction sector, it doesn't matter what resource sector, it does not matter, is that if we invest in British Columbians, we will do well. And right now, we're not making those investments. And I think we have to be bold, we have to be decisive, and I'm very confident that whenever the election is, we'll have a platform that does exactly that. And I think the clear, you want to keep going down the road we're going right now, which I don't even want to imagine what this province is going to look like at that time.
Look at our debt.
Exactly. And the fundamental thing I remind British Columbians of, and I remind my own kids, is that if families ran their household budgets the way that this government, this Premier Eby runs the budget of British Columbians, you would lose your home, you would lose your car, you would lose the ability for your child to go to university, because British Columbians cannot run their own personal budgets the way that the province has run the budgets at the cost of the taxpayers of British Columbia.
ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੈਂਡੇਟ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆਉਣ ਵੇਲੇ ਹੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਰੋਲ ਆਊਟ ਕਰੋ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਈਜ਼ੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਪਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸੋਲਵ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਸੋ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਅ ਪਲੈਟਫਾਰਮ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਦਾ ਪਲਾਨ ਟੂ ਡੂ ਦੈਟ ਐਂਡ ਹਾਊ ਟੂ ਡੂ ਇਟ ਪਰ ਜਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ NDP ਸਰਕਾਰ ਰਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਚੜ੍ਹਾ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੇ ਆਪ ਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਾਊਸ ਹੋਲਡ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਯੂ ਨੋ how you can run your household. You have to pay the bills, mortgage payment, all your bills and stuff. And, you know, we don't have handouts that go to the public and raise the taxes and collect the money.
No, somebody way smarter than me once said, eventually you run out of other people's money. And that is exactly what's happening in British Columbia today.
Yeah. So, you know, if you think about it, we're pretty much last part of our interview, and you know, if we look around it and the way the debt and the debt to service the debt, you know, the cost of that is just ballooning, and you know, end of the day, who will pay? Our children, our grandchildren will pay.
We'll all pay, but in fact, it's going to come at the cost of our healthcare sector. It's going to come at the cost of education. And if you look at it, you talked about servicing the debt. The servicing the debt is actually, if you looked at how much that costs every year, it's actually bigger than most ministries in government, right? It's an enormous number. And you're looking at, because if you look at what this government is spending their money on, and you know that if you look at the SkyTrain extension, right? I think SkyTrain's great. I don't agree paying more than 50% of what the budget was and having it, you know, at least 5 years delayed. I think that that's unfortunate. And you can go through every single project. Not one project by this government has ever been on time and on budget. Now,
True.
That is a very sobering fact. And at the end of the day, who is paying for it? It's my kids, it's going to be grandkids, it's going to be generations, and that is so tragic.
Yeah. So ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰਲੀ ਰਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਜਦ ਵੇ ਵੀ ਰਨ ਆਵਰ ਹਾਊਸ ਹੋਲਡਸ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਚਲਾਓਗੇ ਕਰਜ਼ੇ 'ਚ ਤਾਂ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਬਜਟ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟਸ ਆਰ ਐਟ ਲੀਸਟ ਦੇ ਹੈਵ ਅਸ ਟੈਕਸ ਪੇਅਰਸ ਟੂ pay the bill or pay the taxes to pay for that, but eventually ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਆ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦਾ ਉਸ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਿਆਜ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਮੋਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਜਟ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਆ ਸੋ ਟਰੈਵਰ what do you like to say at the end?
Well, I want to say thank you very much. I love the opportunity to come on this show, and I look forward to do it again. And I look forward to seeing you down on the beach, and we'll be probably wearing more casual clothes, and maybe we'll buy you a coffee when I see you down there.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you for coming on my show.
Anytime.
So ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਟਰੈਵਰ ਹੈਲਫਰਡ MLA from Surrey White Rock. ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਵਾਈਟ ਰੌਕ ਬੀਚ 'ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਾਕ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਈਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਲਈਦਾ ਐਂਡ actually other politicians I bump into too. Ginny Sims is walk there, bunch of other sometimes Harry Baines I see him, some councillors. So it's a good walk and good communication with people, so good to see them. And once again, thank you Trevor for coming on my show. We'll bring you again when we have a phone call lines open so people can ask you difficult questions. I think
I welcome it.
Politicians are trained for that. So ਸਾਡੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਵਿਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਲੀਕ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੜੇ ਕੰਸਰਨਿੰਗ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦਾ ਹਲੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਾਮ ਨਿਮਾਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਾਵਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਰੀ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ 'ਚ ਉੱਥੇ ਲਾਈਨ ਅਪਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੰਬੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬੁਰਾ ਹਾਲ ਹੈ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਦਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਬਿਗ ਹੈਗਾ ਸੋ ਬਿਗ ਕੰਸਰਨਿੰਗ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਿਆ ਕਰੋ ਈਮੇਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਦੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਲ MLAs ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਰੋ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਣੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਤਾਂ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਲਦੀ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਨਾ ਬਣਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨਸ ਨੂੰ, ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸੋਲਵ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਹੈਵ ਏ ਹੈਪੀ ਹੈਲਥੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ, ਐਂਡ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ CJ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਸ਼ੋ ਐਵਰੀ ਥਰਸਡੇ ਫਰਮ 7 to 8 o'clock। ਆਪਦੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ, ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦੇ ਸੱਦੀਏ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਕਰੀਏ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ, ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ, ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।